Continuing example 3D. Now that we have an understanding of our overhead cost as the traditional accounting system would account for it, let's take a look at what the company does. They're still trying to understand profitability, and because the company is barely breaking even, they don't really think that their current understanding of cost per unit is necessarily the most helpful. And so what do we say? The production manager says, look, the CPOD is a pretty complicated product. We've added a bunch of new processes. We have new resources. We've hired some new people just since we started making the CPOD. I don't think it makes sense that its overhead cost per unit is really that low. So a bunch of people have a meeting and they determine a few things. And by the way, this is a meeting that this wouldn't really just be one meeting. This would be months and months of investigation and determination and trying to figure out the best way to understand these costs. So a whole bunch of time, thousands of labor hours would have gone into all the work we came up with in the rest of this problem. So don't underestimate the difficulty of trying to implement one of these activity-based costing approaches. But let's see what we found out. We found out that a useful way to break our production activities up is into the resources of machines, materials handling, and purchasing, receiving, and inspection. So those are sort of the three cost pools or the three areas we're going to break our overhead resources into. The company's overhead costs that they currently have are really broken up into four current line items. They've got wages, depreciation, utilities, and other. And what they would have done is they would have taken taken a look at the general ledger accounts. They would have done some interviews. They might have watched and observed people perform their work, and they came up with an estimate that 10% of the wages should go to machining costs, 30% should go to materials handling, and 60% to PRI. Depreciation, 40% is to machine, 40% is to materials handling, and 20% is for PRI. For utilities, 60% is to the machines, 30 and 10 to the other two, and for the other categories, 10% is for machine cost, materials handling is 30%, and purchasing, receiving, inspection is 60%. So this is an attempt to take the various types of expenses we have and sort of allocate them first to the different activity types that we have. The second thing we're going to need to do is take those and allocate those directly to products. So for our machine cost, we're still going to use machine hours to allocate those costs to the different products. For materials handling, we're going to take the number of material moves, the number of times a piece of material has to be moved through the production facility. That's going to be the way we allocate these costs. And for purchasing, receiving, and inspection, we're going to use purchase orders as the allocation base. Now we had some insight that came from the meeting. The appliques and the other details in the CPOD come from different suppliers. Some suppliers are better than others, so we have to do some inspection, and they're applied at different times in the production process. Maybe they're layered in a particular order to get a particular appearance to the appliques. The CPOD is responsible for quite a bit of the material handling and purchasing activity. So it's a more complicated product, and these resources that we have to get pieces, parts, and materials where they need to go at the right time, those are generally used on the CPOD product. And that's probably the insight that the production manager had when she said, this isn't really what's going on in the overhead resources. So using the insights gathered above, the controller designed an ABC system to allocate overhead costs to products. So how would that look? The first thing we have to do is allocate resource costs to activity pools. So let's go ahead and do the first stage allocation. And to make things a little bit easier, I'm simply going to copy and paste these tables. So we have our three different cost pools: machine cost, materials handling, purchasing, receiving, inspection. We've got these different costs that are going to go into them. And really what we can do is we can take the same table, and using Excel as our friend here, we can say that the machine cost is going to get 10% of $250,000. And we are going to drag that across to our different cost pools. Machine cost is going to get 40% of the $400,000. And again, we can drag that across to our cost pools. Machine cost is going to get 60% of the $80,000. And it's going to get 10% of the $60,000. And so we can total the costs in each of our cost pools. And so what we've done here is we've taken our different kinds of overhead costs based on the financial statement line item that they're under, wages, depreciation, utilities, and other, and we've sort of recast them as components of different cost pools. So now instead of saying I've got $250,000 of wages and $400,000 of depreciation, $80,000 utilities, and $60,000 of other, I can say all of these things that relate to machining activities total $239,000. And all of these things that relate to materials handling activities total $277,000. And all of my costs that relate to purchasing, receiving, and inspection totals $274,000. So that is our first stage allocation of taking our resource cost and putting them into cost pools.